This is an unboxing and review of the Artist Guitars NTL1. If you want to hear what it sounds like, I'm not going to give you timestamps so you can skip ahead and hear what it sounds like. You have to listen to me talk about it, alright? I need the view time. Hello, today I'm going to be reviewing the Artist NTL1 nylon string solid body crossover guitar, you could call it. Now, the last guitar that I got was a Kato acoustic nylon string crossover guitar that looks very similar to this. It has a very similar finish, like a very similar sort of sunburst thing going on here. And both guitars have a piezo under the saddle, and the main difference is that whereas the other one was hollow body with fan bracing, this is a solid body with a bolt-on neck. The other one, the neck is set in, whereas the Kato has a microphone system inside as well as the piezo. This one is just the piezo. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give a little bit of a review of the Artist NTL1, and naturally I'm going to compare it with the Kato Hispania, or you may know that guitar as the Martinez Hispania. This is half the price that I paid for the Kato. The Kato cost me $700, and that was actually a sale price. This one, $349, and that's, I think, the standard price, and it's just come out. So if this guitar doesn't do too well, the price may drop, but if it does well, maybe the price might go up a little bit. I've seen with artist guitars, what seems to be happening with the prices is that they upgrade their guitars, they improve them and bring out a newer model, and that price is a little higher. And then you also see some guitars that don't seem to be doing well, like that fan fret headless 6-string that I looked at, and you see a lot of them pop up in the bargain bin as customer returned instruments, and then maybe they discontinue the model or whatever. But I keep coming back to artist guitars, not just because they're cheap, but the quality is so good for the price. One of the first things I noticed about this guitar, it's got bound fret board, so you can't actually really feel much fret ends along here. It's actually a lot nicer than the Kato when you feel along here. The Kato has a little bit of sharpness, a little bit of fret ends that bump against your fingers. It might have just been that particular one that I have, but this is already feeling a little nicer. One thing that's a little strange is that on my 7th fret of this Artist, there's a little divot. Like, I probably can't really even show it to you, but the binding goes in a little bit. It's just like, look, as I feel along. I can't see how it would affect the playability, but it was just an interesting little thing. I haven't really done a whole lot of tuning yet because it arrived to me just detuned by about a semitone, and I put it in tune and it more or less stayed in tune. But from what I've felt so far of these tuners, they're pretty good. I'd say they're probably at least as good as the ones on the Kato. I don't know much about gear ratios, but just looking at the size of the gear, it looks like there's a fairly big gear ratio. You could probably look that up in the specs. Now, this feels as heavy as an electric guitar. I think there is some weight relief in this solid body, but yeah, it feels like a solid body, which is not to be confused with a solid top. A solid top is when the guitar's hollow and the top is one piece of wood, not laminate. This is an actual solid body, and so it's a lot quieter when you play it without plugging it in. And that was part of my motivation to get this guitar. I liked the Kato so much. Another thing I noticed about the Artist guitar is that, well, the action is higher than the Kato. When I first got the Kato, I looked at the action and I thought, that's a little bit high. But then I remembered it's nylon strings, so the pressure that you need to push the strings down is nowhere near as much as a steel string acoustic or an electric. And so, on the Kato, the action's fine, even though it looks high. If you're a steel string player, you play it and you realize it's actually quite all right. With this one, it is a bit higher than the Kato, and it looks kind of high. when I look past the 12th fret. But at the nut, it's just fine. Like, I can easily play an F bar chord, that's just fine. Now, as for the appointments, you've got volume control and a tone control, just like on an electric guitar. And it takes a 9-volt battery, whereas the Cato takes an 18650 lithium rechargeable, which you can recharge in the guitar. So you just put a USB in there. This one's just taking a 9-volt, so that's much simpler, much easier. You just have to keep buying 9-volt batteries, that's all. But what this one doesn't have is it doesn't have the headphone jack. So on the Cato Hispania, there's a headphone jack, so you can plug in and you can hear what you're playing. And the Cato Hispania also has reverb, delay, it has some effects on there, so you can listen with effects with the headphone jack. Now, I don't see any need for that on that guitar because it's acoustic and you can actually hear yourself playing acoustically. So, if you're trying to play quietly and not wake anyone up, you already have an acoustic sound. Whereas with this one, this guitar is really quiet when you play acoustically, and because it's quiet, it might be nice to have a headphone jack so that you can listen with headphones. But I don't really know about the whole preamp situation here. Maybe that could be one thing that artists could upgrade in a future model of this guitar if it goes well. Now, I don't have a problem with not having a headphone jack. It's just I have to plug into an amp and then plug the headphones into the amp, so I can still practice quietly like that if I want to do it, or I can just practice acoustically. Now, as for the tone, as for the sound, one thing that I've noticed about this guitar, even more than with the Cato Hispania, is that maybe because I've got higher action, maybe because of the type of piezo pickup we've got here, it does pick up a lot more of the treble. And so this slide noise that you can hear, it comes through a lot more. You might hate that. I personally like that because when I play guitar, or when I practice playing guitar, I'm trying to improve my technique. And if I hear all the nasty noises that the guitar can make, then I have to fix that with my technique. So I have to lift my fingers off the strings so that it doesn't make that slide noise. You might not like that sound so much, but I like having it there. It's good for your practice, and you can turn it down. You can just turn the tone knob down and a lot of that will go away. The other thing I've noticed, when you play a solid body instrument, even when you've got a pickup, the way the solid body instrument responds to your touch is very different from the way a hollow body instrument or an acoustic with a soundboard is going to respond. Acoustic instrument, you tend to get more attack and then less sustain. And also there's sort of tonal qualities in the acoustic that will come through even with the pickup under the saddle. And then changing to this one, the solid body instrument, you notice that that's different. So this one, I was playing in a guitar lesson. The student was doing this sort of thing on an acoustic guitar. Hang on. What is that? Just noticed some buzz. Anyway, the student was doing this on an acoustic guitar, and I was doing the same thing on this guitar, and I was playing through an amp, and you could hear the sustain of this guitar, whereas you could hear the attack of the acoustic guitar. And yeah, it's definitely a different sound. This sounds almost electric when you just hear the full chord ringing through while you play. Whereas when you play acoustically, you hear the attack a lot more and you hear less of the sustain. And I believe even if you plug in an acoustic instrument, you're still going to hear more of the attack and less of the sustain than if it's solid body. As for the neck profile on the NTL1, it is much thinner than a classical guitar, a little bit wide, not super wide. You can reach your thumb over if you really try. but it's not super easy to do that. Like, it's not like playing an electric. It's not so easy to reach your thumb over the top. You can see the action is pretty high. You see on the upper frets, it's pretty high. The lower frets aren't so bad. They're okay. But up here, you know, yikes. So I have this device for measuring the height of the action off the frets. It cost like $185, I think, if I remember rightly. Guitar players often go through these phases where we think that we can build and fix our own instruments, and we spend hundreds of dollars doing this when we could pay a professional to do it for us. But anyway, I have it now. And of course, the button battery had run out because it costs hundreds of bucks, and yet it still turns itself on while inside its case. It turns on really easily. Just get that back inside there. So what you do is you sit it on the fret, and it's got a little thing sitting on there, and you zero it. Hang on. Oh my goodness, so finicky. You zero it there. So now we're at 0, and then while it's zeroed, you press it down as far as it'll go. It's almost dead on 3 millimeters. That was the 6th string. Now the 1st string, we're pretty much zeroed out. Yeah, we're on 0. You gotta realize how freaking hard it is to use this finicky little device while I'm also holding my phone to film it. So, okay, so we're at 2.5 mil on the 1st string and 3 mil on the 6th string. That sits within acceptable range for classical guitar. Let's do the same test on the Cato. All right, I'm on the Cato 6th string, 2.7. And for the 1st string of the Cato, it is 1.6-ish, somewhere around 1.6. So the Cato is quite low compared to the Artist Guitars NTL1. If you want to take your strings off, get a string winder. Makes it so much faster. You get your string winder, see how much faster that is. Why would you not? You know, this is getting fully slack in a matter of seconds. Releasing the tension. I'm not completely unwinding it. Releasing the tension to pretty much nothing. Now, put the capo on it, and you see what that does is it just holds the strings onto the neck, because I'm going to undo them over here, and I don't want them all to fly everywhere and for me to like end up with a tangle situation. Now, you want these strings to be so loose that they don't make a note when you strum them. All right, so see how loose they are? Really loose. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to very gently, very slowly unscrew the bolts in the back of the neck pocket by hand with a screwdriver, not a power tool, because you can strip them, you can ruin everything. So I'm going to do it with a screwdriver, and then I'm going to put a shim in there. I'm going to make it out of Global Care information scrap paper, and then we'll try it out and see if the action is any better. Now, something that can happen with guitar neck pockets is there's actually very thin wood on the sides of the neck pocket in the cutaway area. So you've got to be extremely careful removing the neck, because that thin wood can crack, and then you end up with a chipped out piece in your neck pocket around the cutaway, which isn't very good on a guitar that you just bought, you know, even a cheapie. I had a guitar student once, and he came to the lesson with a guitar, and the bolts were sticking out, and you could see a big gap in the neck pocket. I don't mean a little gap, I mean like 5 millimeters, where the neck had pulled forwards. And I said to him, that ain't right. And he said to me, no, it's supposed to be like that. And I said, it's definitely not supposed to be like that. I said, that's why your action's so high, because you're hanging on by a thread, literally. And well, I didn't fix his guitar on the spot. These days I probably would fix it on the spot, but I think I only had like a half-hour lesson with him, so I didn't really have time to do a lesson plan and fix his guitar. But I sent him to a guy I know, a professional luthier, and I'm pretty sure he would have given him a full setup on his guitar anyway. So, you know, that's the thing. I could have tightened up the neck, and then it would have been way out, and then I don't have time to completely fix it, and then he would tell me that I wrecked it if his guitar's then unplayable. Fixing other people's guitars is something you do when you're really confident. When you've done it to your own property and you feel safe, then you can go ahead and start messing with other people's property. We've got movement in the neck, starting to move. One more. Oh, and we're off. Sometimes when the strings are still attached, that can make it impossible to remove the neck properly, but I was feeling lucky today, so I just left them on this time. Let's see how we go. Gently, gently, and the neck, the weight of the neck, you take it off the body, and then the body wants to fall down this way. So yeah, let's have a look at this. All right, see how handy it is to use a capo on the neck, so I didn't have to mess up all of this stuff up here. Now, when you look into the neck pocket, this is the thing. Guitar looks beautiful over here, the parts that you're going to see. But as soon as you crack her open, now I'm not criticizing this because all guitars look like this. I see you see the edge of the stain, so you don't see any wood colored bits through the gap. See, I don't know if you can see this, but you can see where the router bit has gone through here. And this, you know, this is a fulcrum point in the guitar. This pocket determines the angle of the neck. So if this isn't routed out with precision to the exact right angle, the neck will be drastically off kilter. And I see the router bit where it's come across here. They probably had to shave a little bit off here. Maybe it had too much back angle, and so they shaved a bit off here so that it would come forward a little bit, and now it's a little bit too far forward. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a little shim out of paper and put it here. You see how I folded that bit so it fits in there? Now I'm going to trim away this part here. It's not that important for the shim to be a perfect wedge shape, even though it is a wedge. It's going to wedge the neck onto a new angle, and especially because this is a nylon guitar, it's not a lot of tension that's going on it. So as a stress point, this isn't going to be subject to as much damage as maybe a steel string with big heavy strings on it. That might be an issue. So there we go. We'll see how that goes. That's folded over a couple times, and I'll measure the action once the neck's back on. You can see they just used wood screws in this neck, which isn't the worst thing in the world. I mean, some guitar necks have little inserts with a thread on it so that you can use a bolt instead of a wood screw. As long as you're not constantly pulling the neck off and putting it back on, which you shouldn't be anyway, then you should be all right. So hopefully I don't have to do this again. Hopefully the action is at a good height with this shim. I might have to change it if it's not right, but here goes. Alrighty, so I'm just going to put some tension back on the strings. The good thing about not changing the strings when you do this is that they're already stretched, so I'll be able to get it back into correct pitch, because I'd like to test the action tuned up if I can. They left me heaps of string on the tuning pegs, so I didn't have to detach anything, which is handy. I reckon when this guitar has a good action, it's going to be really nice. I don't really have a very good sense of pitch, so I always use a tuner when I tune. Even when I've just got one string that's out of tune, I don't feel too confident just fixing it by ear unless it's really obvious. I screwed the neck back on. I did it basically as tightly as I could with the screwdriver before it started to strip. You know how screwdrivers strip the head of the screw? That's just ugly when you look at that and you see a stripped head on a screw. I did as best I could because you don't want it too loose. You also don't want it stripped, and because it doesn't have metal inserts in the neck, you can't keep screwing and unscrewing it a million times because you'll strip those screw holes in your neck and then your neck is kaput. Well, not entirely kaput. I mean, you can fix stripped screw holes, but you're looking at like filling them up with like, I guess you'd fill it up with sawdust, pack it really tightly, put some CA glue in there, super glue. The super glue wicks into the dust, and so essentially you fill in your holes and then you'd have to re-screw them, which that's too much work for me. You know, I'm a dad. I feel guilty even taking the time to do this, but you know, you got to have a life as well. In my review, I said that these tuners are nice, but when I'm turning them, they're dry. I think they need a little bit of lube. I'm not 100% sure what kind of lubricant you use on guitar tuners. There are graphite-based lubricants, which are probably very good. Some people may say WD-40, but that's a petroleum-based oil, and petroleum-based products can corrode rubber or natural fibers, and I don't know if there's rubber parts in these tuners. Probably trumpet slide oil would be good because there are rubber parts in a trumpet. So you'd think that the slide oil would probably be designed to be rubber safe. And there's that spray that's like WD-40. It's called RP7, I think. And that smells similar to trumpet slide oil. So I think if it smells similar, probably is similar, and RP7 is supposed to be safe with rubber parts. You know, some people when they're cleaning their boat motor, they spray it all with WD-40, and then all the waterproofing little O-rings and stuff all corrode. $1,000 right there. Probably more than $1,000 to fix that, just because you used the wrong oil. Anyway, what was I talking about? Oh yeah, the tuning pegs. Yeah, I'll probably just put a little drop of, what do we got here? Valve oil. Holton's electric oil. Might just ask Gemini if that's the right stuff to put on classical guitar tuners. All right, now I'm looking at my action height. I can't eyeball any real difference. My brain's telling me that the action's slightly lower, but you know how like your brain sometimes throws you off. So let's use the precision instruments, shall we? All right, so last time I checked this one, I think it said 3 millimeters on the 12th fret of the 6th string. 2.2, that's an improvement. Yeah, 2.2, yeah. That's a good improvement. That's nice, I'm happy with that. And the action at the 12th fret of the 1st string, I think was 2.5 mil. Let's see what it is now. 1.69. So it's, yeah, basically the same as the Cato now. And now that I've improved the action in terms of numbers, you know, on paper, things are looking good, but I might think there might be a bit of string buzz now on the frets, fret buzz when I play. So I'll give it a little road test and then we'll see how we're going. Now, by the way, let's just see if there's a gap here. If you see any kind of gap here. I don't see a gap. Or over here, do you see the gap where the shim would have raised the neck up? I don't really see it. Actually, I do. I was looking through my camera and I don't see it, but when I look with direct sight, actually I can see the gap. That's okay. That just means it's working. All right, so now I'm going to play a couple of samples so you can hear what the guitar sounds like. Now, bear in mind, for that last guitar review that I did, I played some songs and I got copyright claimed. And that's fair enough. If someone's going to claim a song that I play because they wrote the song or because their record company owns the copyright to that song, that's fair enough. The problem I had with this is that the people claiming the song were not the original copyright proprietors of that song. They were basing their claim on a song that they owned a cover recording for. So they owned the rights to a recording that was done by an artist who was covering the original song by Eric Clapton. I didn't really think that was fair, so I went in to appeal the decision, but YouTube only gives you a few options when you're appealing a copyright decision, and none of the options corresponded with my complaint, which was that the person making the claim was not the true copyright proprietor. So what I did was I trimmed that sample out of my video, and so you ended up getting less sounds from the actual guitar, and you might not even really get a good clear idea of what that Cato Hispania guitar sounded like. So that was lame. So what I did here was I made sure I didn't play any songs that could be claimed on copyright. I just played a few chords and I played a couple of little classical things. But I think you basically get an idea of what the guitar sounds like. It sounds like a piezo pickup. Now, if you've played a guitar with a piezo pickup in the past, you've probably played an acoustic guitar with a piezo pickup, so you already have some idea of what it sounds like. An electric guitar with a piezo pickup, sort of even more extreme than that. It's like you're just getting that pickup and you're not getting any tonal qualities from any acoustic resonance off of the soundboard. So you get that really bright sound of the frets, like when you do a glissando. You get a really clear glissando. You hear every little fret as you slide up. Or when you do hammer-ons and pull-offs, you get this real nice buzzy sound as you do the hammer-ons and pull-offs. So they come really easily for you. But you also get the sliding sound. You get a really clear buzz if you're to accidentally lift one of your fingers slightly as you're holding down a note. So if you're holding a chord and one of your fingers slightly releases the pressure on the string, you get a really loud buzz from that string as it vibrates against the fret. All of these things are good for you developing your technique on the guitar. But if you want to sound good straight away, you might not like this guitar so much. It's a little too honest for some people, I think. Now, when I compare it to the Cato Hispania or Martinez Hispania, depending on what country you're in, the Hispania feels a little different. It's got a slightly wider fingerboard. It's a little bit more like a classical guitar in that regard. And if you wanted to play classical guitar repertoire, or you want to practice classical guitar repertoire on a small-bodied guitar, I prefer the Cato Hispania for that kind of thing. Although remember that that doesn't have a bolt-in neck. So if you don't like the action, there's not a whole lot you can do about that. It does have a truss rod, which is good. So you have a little bit of adjustability, but it's not as good as being able to re-angle the neck like I did on the Artist guitar. I could imagine you could play classical repertoire on the Artist NTL1. It would be a little bit more difficult because the response under your fingers is different with a solid body, and the piezo is very finicky. If you could get really clean with your playing, you could sound all right. But I get the feeling that that's not really what that guitar is made for. It's sort of made as a cheapest option to sound something like Tim Henson. And I'm not really sure what kind of person would do that. So I don't really know if there's kids these days that are actually playing like Tim Henson. Probably a little bit too old and out of touch to know that. But playing around with the dynamic qualities of a piezo pickup is something that I suppose, if there's Polyphia fans that are buying nylon guitars to sound like Tim Henson, well, that's quite interesting. I sort of grew up in the Metallica shredding days where like a fast solo was sort of like a Eddie Van Halen sort of thing. Nylon, crazy fast playing, that wasn't really a thing. Personally, for me, I like this guitar and I'm going to keep it because I can practice my technique and I can practice playing cleanly with a small-bodied instrument that doesn't make any real acoustic sound. So if someone's sleeping in the other room, as is often the case when I'm practicing the guitar, I'm not going to bother them. Can you play distorted on it? No, and I didn't try. You could probably do singer-songwriter stuff where you strum some chords on it and sing along. That'd be fine. It sounds pretty good through my cheap little battery-operated Buskers amp for acoustic guitars. Do I recommend that as a first guitar? Yes, because it's easy to press the strings down, which makes it easier to play than a steel string guitar when you're spending that amount of money. If you spend $300 on a steel string guitar, you're probably going to get a high action and it won't be easy to press the strings down. Whereas this one comes with a high action, but it's nylon, so you can press the strings down. So when you learn your open chords, this one's going to be easier than a lot of the other stuff out there. Is anyone going to get this as their first guitar? No. Even if it's good for that, they're not going to do it because it's strange and it's niche, and people don't get niche guitars for their first guitar. Broadly speaking, yes, I recommend this guitar. I think it's good and I think it's a lot of fun. Who do I recommend it for? I don't know.